What's up guys, welcome back to my channel. I am the house hacking mom, and today I want to share with y'all one of my absolute favorite recipes from this summer, and that is a whole wheat crust zucchini pizza. And this is a wonderful recipe. I have tried it multiple times, and I will tell you, I am not one of those sorts of people who likes to make everything out of cauliflower and zucchini and broccoli and random things. I like food to taste like what it's supposed to taste like, and I find that this zucchini pizza really nails it, hits the spot. So let's go ahead and get started on this recipe. So first we're going to make the crust, and you can totally just use a store-bought crust if you like, but this pizza crust is 50% whole wheat, so it's going to be a little bit healthier, and it's really not hard to make at all. You're going to start off with 125 grams of all-purpose flour, and then the same amount, 125 grams of a whole wheat flour. And as you'll notice, I obviously prefer to weigh out my ingredients. Most people have a kitchen scale somewhere in the house. If you don't, you can do it by volume, and you can just look up the conversions, but it is far more accurate to use a scale, and you will truly get a different result if you start using a scale for your baking. And then to our flour, we're going to add 1/4 teaspoon of salt. You can heap that teaspoon of salt, and then 5 grams of instant yeast. And then for the water, I am adding 150 grams of room temperature water, or 2/3 of a cup. And depending on how far ahead of time you are making your pizza dough will sort of determine the temperature of the water. If you're going to do it, say roughly an hour before you're going to be making your pizza, room temperature is totally fine. If you're going to be doing it multiple hours before, use cool water. And if you're trying to use it really soon, then you're going to want to use a warmer water, but nothing over 110 degrees. And you can see my dough there was a little bit dry. Whole wheat flour does absorb a little bit more water than all-purpose flour, and it kind of varies time to time, really, just depending on how much bran is in that exact amount of whole wheat flour. So I added just a splash, a teaspoon or so of extra water to help my dough come together. And then once I can see that it is kind of forming one solid mass, I'm just going to work it together here in the bowl before turning it out on my counter. And then once I've turned it out, I'm just using the heel of my hand to push on the dough and knead it. That is totally optional. You do not have to knead this dough. You can just kind of bring it together and just let it rise as is. But kneading it will make it much easier to work with and less susceptible to tearing when you're trying to put it in your pan. So it is a good idea to do it if you have time. And then you're just going to put it in a greased bowl and cover it until you are ready to use it. And then we'll just set that aside. And now for the star ingredient of our recipe, I have 2 larger medium-sized zucchinis. You want to go for around 2 to 2.5 pounds of zucchini. You're just going to cut the stems off and grate them up. And once you have finished grating your zucchini, you're just going to go ahead and put it in a colander and add your salt. The salt is going to serve to help extract all the extra moisture from your zucchini, which can kind of over wet the dough and make your pizza soggy. So you do want to add your salt and let this sit for at least 30 minutes preferably. It's just 1.5 teaspoons of table salt or sea salt. And you're just going to kind of massage it in, and then I just set this colander in my sink, and then when I'm ready to use it, I really press and squeeze out all the extra moisture. And then for your cheese, I use 8 ounces of just plain old cheddar, but if you wanted to get fancy, you could use something like a Gruyère cheese, but cheddar works just fine, and I just grate it on the same grater. No need to wash anything here. And this recipe serves about 6 people, 6 adults, I would say. And you're just going to grease your baking pan. I do it on a half baking sheet. This is not going to work on a full-sized cookie sheets. This is a half baking sheet, which is 13 by 18 inches. You could also just do it on a large pizza round baking pan if you have that as well. And right now I'm just going to turn out my dough kind of gently and try to stretch it out without tearing it. This is a slightly more delicate dough, so my goal is just to sort of gingerly stretch it out a little bit before I go ahead and switch it over to my greased pan. And then, you know, just using my fingers, just kind of gently ease it on into the corners. Where I feel it's thin, I don't stretch any further, and where I feel the dough is thicker, I kind of pull from those areas. And it just takes a little bit of maneuvering, but it definitely should fill your pan pretty well. So once you've got your dough all situated, you're going to cover it with plastic wrap and let it rise until you're ready to use it, and preferably get a big enough piece of plastic wrap the first time instead of like me having to piecemeal it together. And while I'm doing all this, I usually have already preheated my oven because sometimes it takes a while for your oven to get to 500 degrees. And with that zucchini, again, make sure that you really have pushed on it while it's in the colander to drain out as much moisture as you can. You can even wrap it up in a paper towel to kind of squeeze out all that extra moisture. And then you're just going to mix it up with your grated cheese. You're going to kind of have to use your fingers to break up the clumps of zucchini because it's going to want to kind of clump up together. So you're just going to break all that up. And then I went ahead and added about half a tablespoon of Panko breadcrumbs, just plain breadcrumbs, to mix it in to the topping mixture. And now we're going to start working on a dipping marinara sauce. There is no traditional tomato sauce on this pizza. It's just the cheese and the zucchini. So I like to make a dipping marinara sauce to go with it. I just use 8 ounces of canned tomato sauce, 1 clove of garlic, a pinch of salt. I'm not measuring anything, as you can see, just a splash of red wine vinegar and a little drizzle of olive oil. Not measuring anything here again. And then I just use an immersion blender because it's nice and I like not having to get out multiple containers. But if you don't have an immersion blender, you can just use a regular blender or a food processor and just kind of blend it all together. And side note, if you are using an immersion blender, make sure you pour out a little bit of your can before you start so you don't overflow. And then I took mine and put it into a small saucepan and kind of heated it up and let it thicken a little bit. And that way I also was able to serve it warm instead of just room temperature. And then you're just going to take your slightly risen pizza dough in the pan and you're going to add your lovely topping to it. And you're going to want to make sure you get it all the way to the edge because this is sort of acting as the sauce. The moisture from the zucchini will act as the sauce, and then the cheese will act as the cheese, of course. And then you want to go ahead and add about 3 tablespoons of plain breadcrumbs to the top. It's going to give it a really nice texture, add some crunch to the top. And then I didn't show it, but I did add some pepperoni because my husband wanted it and it turned out great. I've also done it just regular most of the time, and that is also delicious. And I baked it for about 20 minutes, but it may take up to 25 minutes. Just make sure you're checking on it. And it turned out delicious as always. And then we used the marinara sauce to dip it. Just kind of like a breadstick, and it is so yummy. Thank y'all so much for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please make sure you hit the like button and subscribe. And I will see y'all in my next video. Bye!